Welcome to Global News. In the news, New Zealand extends state of emergency over Cyclone Gabrielle. China provinces top list of regions vulnerable from climate change. Taiwan's KMT hopes for polls increase after China trip. In Brazil, Sao Paulo state, floods, landslides kill dozens, and North Korea launches more missiles amidst firing range warning. These are more stories coming your way. Over Cyclone Gabrielle, New Zealand's government extended the state of emergency. It declared and announced an emergency relief package worth $186 million as officials cautioned that the final cost of the deadly storm could increase above $8 billion. On Monday, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins said, according to reports, that the storm, which has killed 11 people so far, has caused damage on a scale not seen in New Zealand for at least a generation. He stretched the national state of emergency, which was declared last week for only the third time in its history, a further 7 days to aid the recovery and relief efforts. The cyclone hit the North Island's northernmost region on February 12th and tracked down the east coast, inflicting widespread destruction. Finance Minister Grant Robinson earlier on Monday said the total cost to the government could be similar to the 13.5 billion New Zealand dollars. That's $8.43 billion in spent rebuilding Christchurch after the devastating 2011 earthquake. Robinson has been appointed Cyclone Recovery Minister in addition to his existing portfolio. The provincial relief package announced on Monday provides 250 million New Zealand dollars, that's $156 million to fix critical roads across disaster-hit regions, and more 50 million New Zealand dollars, $31 million in emergency help was set aside for businesses and primary producers. More relief and rebuilding funding from the government is anticipated. Police have confirmed 11 deaths in circumstances connected to the cyclone, most of those in Hawke's Bay on the North Island. Roughly 2,200 people are still unaccounted for. Andrew Costa, New Zealand Police Commissioner, said, according to reports on Monday, that the number of deaths will likely increase, adding that difficulty with communications is hindering attempts to make contact with affected people. New Zealand has deployed 60 Starlink satellites built by Elon Musk's own SpaceX, with another 30 on the way to plug gaps in the telecommunications network as roughly 15,000 people across the North Island remain without power. Recovery efforts are continuing with search and rescue teams still working in cyclone-damaged areas, while power and telecommunications remain down for some homes. Roads are closed and people are reporting issues getting cash. China is home to over three-quarters of the regions most at risk from climate change, with some of the world's most significant manufacturing centers strengthened by severe weather, according to a new report. China's eastern Jiangsu province topped as the world's most climate vulnerable region, followed by Shandong, Hebei, and Henan, according to a report released on Monday by climate risk specialist XDI. In total, China is home to 16 of the world's 20 most at-risk regions, according to XDI. After China, the United States is home to the most at-risk areas, according to XDI. Florida, which is ranked 10th worldwide, is the U.S. state most under threat, followed by California and Texas. 9 areas of India also made the top 50 at-risk region. Other main economic centers in the top 100 include Argentina's Buenos Aires, Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City, and Indonesia's Jakarta. In Europe, Germany's Lower Saxony region is deemed the most vulnerable to climate change. Italy's Veneto region, which contains the city of Venice, is ranked the 4th most at-risk region in Europe. XDI's analysis evaluated 2,600 territories globally, modeling damage from 1990 to 2050 based on the pessimistic scenario of 3 degrees Celsius, that's 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit rise in global temperatures by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC. Researchers said the findings highlights the massive potential dangerous weather events. Investors may apply risk. On politics, Taiwan's major opposition Kuomintang KMT has wrapped up a 9-day trip to China, including talks with some in presidential elections that are due to be held next year. known as the nationalist, rather-minded voters on the self-affinity for China. The journey marks the second visit in 12 months, and self-ruled Taiwan rose to their highest in 25 years. Held days after Beijing staged military drills and launched missiles into the Taiwan Strait in protest at a visit by then United States Speaker for the House, Nancy Pelosi, to the Democratic Island, Sea's August trip was highly controversial. Equally, this one earning a reproach from Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, the body that oversees Taipei's relations with Beijing. China claims the land as its own. Analysts say the flight into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, an area of land and sea watched by the military to intimidate Taiwan. The KMT, of course, is going to jump at the chance to demonstrate that they can cooperate with projects on Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific region. Of President Tsai Ing-wen, called a separatist by the Chinese Communist Party of being too hostile with China and of trying to shed the party, as read a reference to the colors of the CPP. Torrential rain has caused flooding and landslides in coastal areas of Brazil's southeast, leaving at least 36 people dead and hundreds of others displaced. In Sao Paulo, state footages from the town of São Sebastião on Sunday showed the whole neighborhood underwater, debris from hillside houses swept away by mud, as well as flooded Sao Paulo, and where several people from the capital spent the holiday weekend ahead of the Christian festival of Lent, was one of the hardest hit, as a record 600 millimeters to 84 inches of rain fell in 24 hours, city officials said. According to a statement from the Sao Paulo state government, closely 35 people died in San Sebastião. Sao Paulo State Governor Tarcísio de Freitas declared a state of emergency in 5 towns along the coast. His government said 566 people had been displaced. Weather forecasts show heavy rains are set to continue in Sao Paulo's coastal area, challenging rescue workers and raising the prospect of a higher death figure. The federal government ordered the mobilization of numerous ministries to help victims restore infrastructure and start reconstruction work, exceeding 55 kilometers per hour, that's 34 miles per hour, and waves of more than 1 meter high on Saturday, according to reports. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Brazil's president, said, according to reports, that he will visit the main affected areas on Monday. He said government at all levels will work to take care of the injured, look for missing people, and restore roads, energy, and telecommunications. Moving ahead, according to South Korea's military, North Korea has fired a pair of short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast 2 days after Pyongyang recommenced banned testing activities with an intercontinental ballistic missile launch. South Korea's military said it strongly condemned the 2 launches as an act of significant provocation. They took place from a western coastal town just north of the North Korean capital on Monday morning, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said in a statement. According to reports, 2 projectiles were fired from a multiple rocket launcher aiming at targets 395 kilometers, that's 245 miles, and 337 kilometers away, respectively. On Monday, Japan also detected the launches, saying 2 ballistic missiles were fired at about 7 o'clock a.m. local time. The missiles reached an altitude of about 100 kilometers, 62 miles, and 50 kilometers, 31 miles, and traveled between 350 kilometers, 217 miles, and 400 kilometers, 249 miles before falling outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. There were no reports of damage to aircraft or vessels. In a statement, the ministry said it will continue to gather and analyze information in close cooperation with the United States. North Korea's series of actions, including its repeated ballistic missile launches, threaten the peace and security of Japan, the region, and the international community, the ministry said. Japan launched a strong protest and forcefully condemned North Korea. South Korea's foreign ministry announced fresh sanctions aiming 4 individuals and 5 entities, including a South African national and 2 Singaporean shipping firms, following Monday's launches. Stephanie Dujarric, United Nations spokesperson, said United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres strongly condemned the newest launches and urged Pyongyang to immediately desist from taking any more provocative actions and resume denuclearization dialogue. There are more stories. Iran refutes enriching uranium to 84% purity amidst IAEA role. Iran has denied that it has deliberately enriched uranium to a purity of 84% amidst ongoing issues with the nuclear watchdog and disagreements over its 2015 nuclear deal. According to reports on Sunday, inspectors with the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, had found uranium enriched to a purity of 84%, just below the 90% needed for a bomb, and an attempting to determine if it was produced intentionally. This is the highest purity uranium ever found in Iran, which has slowly increased its enrichment since 2019, 1 year after the unilateral withdrawal of the United States from its nuclear deal with world powers, and has declared enrichment up to 60%. Iranian officials have said they are not looking for a nuclear weapon. The spokesperson for the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Behruz Kamalvandi, said, according to report late on Sunday, that particles with a purity of higher than 60% have been discovered by inspectors, but that had happened before and was nothing out of the ordinary. According to him, an issue like this was not something the agency will even report to its member states, so the fact that it has been revealed to was an effort towards smearing and warping facts. The spokesperson also reiterated Iranian accusations that the agency was being used as a political tool to pressure Iran with confidential reports earlier leaked to Western countries. Earlier this month, Iran and the IAEA clashed last after a leaked confidential agency report said the interconnection between two cascades of advanced IR-6 contrivux at the sensitive underground site at Fordo had been changed without notice. Iran, which began enriching to 60% at Fordo in November last year in response to essential resolution passed at the IAEA board, disregarded the reports as incorrect. The Western parties to the nuclear deal, known officially as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, have continually called on Iran to fully collaborate with the agency and reinstate its total monitoring access. In Africa, African Union suspends Israel's observer status. The African Union has said that Israel's observer status at the bloc was suspended. That was the reason it was not invited to attend the weekend summit. The news comes after Israeli Ambassador Sharon Bali was removed from the African Union's annual summit in Ethiopia on Saturday as she tried to attend using a non-transferable invitation issued only to Israel's ambassador to the African Union, Eleli Admasu. The footage circulating on social media showed guards escorting Bali out of the AU Assembly Hall in Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. AU Commission Chief Moussa Faki Mahamat said, according to reports on Sunday, that the status is suspended until such time as this committee can deliberate, and so we did not invite Israeli officials to our summit, adding that an investigation was being conducted into Saturday's incident. A spokesperson for the Israel's foreign ministry said Bali was an accredited observer with an entry tag and accused the AU of being taken hostage by a small number of extremist states like Algeria and South Africa, which are driven by hatred and controlled by Iran. The event highlighted a spat within the Pan-African bloc over a unilateral 2021 decision by Mahamat to give Israel observer status, stoking protests by many member states. Israel obtained observer status after 2 decades of diplomatic attempts. It had earlier held the role at the Organization of African Unity, OAU, but was long thwarted in its attempts to recover it after the OAU was disbanded in 2002 and replaced by the African Union. The Israeli Foreign Ministry said at the time that the new status could enable Israel and the AU to forge sturdier cooperation on numerous aspects, including the fight against the coronavirus and the prevention of the spread of extremist terrorism on the African continent. And lastly, on global news, Burkina Faso formally ends French military operation. On Sunday, Burkina Faso announced that activities by the French army in the jihadist hit West African states were formally over after bilateral relations embittered in recent months. Burkina's army said in a statement top officers from Burkinabe and French forces in the country held a flag-lowering ceremony to mark the occasion at a camp on the outskirts of the capital, Ouagadougou, on Saturday. Last month, France confirmed it will withdraw its contingent of hundreds of soldiers stationed in Burkina Faso after the junta ruling the Sahel country demanded the force pull out within 4 weeks. The request came days after Burkina's Prime Minister Apollinaire Kelem Tambele declared Russia to be a reasonable choice of new partner in the anti-jihadist fight. Some of the forces left days after that announcement. Their departure marks another significant action in the scaling down of France's military presence in the region. The junta in neighboring Mali also maintained that French troops leave, and in 2022, French President Emmanuel Macron ended the anti-jihadist Burkina mission there after a decade. The jihadist attacks continue in the region. We'll be right back after this time out with more stories from Nigeria. Stay with us. You're welcome back. It's Zuma Nigeria now. Naira crunch over bar on all 500 Naira notes, 1,000 Naira notes. Serap sues Buhari. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has filed a lawsuit against President Muhammadu Buhari over the illegal directive banning the use of all 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira banknotes, conflicting the interim injunction granted by the Apex Court that the all 200 Naira notes and 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes remain legal tender. Attorney General of the Federation, Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami's son, and the Central Bank of Nigeria joined in the suit as defendant. According to reports, Supreme Court, in a case originally brought by 10 states, recently held that the all banknotes remain legal tender pending the determination of a motion on notice fixed for February 22nd. The deadline for the swap of the all notes expired February 10th. The president in the national broadcast on Thursday, however, directed the CBN to recirculate only the old 200 Naira banknotes, banning the use of old 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes in the country. In the suit number FHC/ABJ/CS/233/2023 filed last Friday at the Federal High Court, Abuja, SERAP is asking the court to determine whether Buhari's directive banning the 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira banknotes is not inconsistent and incompatible with the constitutional duties to obey decisions of the Supreme Court and oath of office. SERAP is asking the court for a declaration that Buhari's directive banning the use of all Naira notes and 1,000 Naira banknotes is a fundamental breach of Section 287, subsection 1 of the Nigerian Constitution 1999 as amended, and his constitutional oath of office, and therefore unconstitutional, unlawful, null and void. It also demands an order of provincial injunction warning Buhari, the CBN and Malami, their agents or privates, from the further imposing the presidential directive barring the all 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira banknotes pending the hearing and determination of the motion on notice filed in its suit. Nasser El-Rufai instructs MDAs to accept old and new Naira notes. Kaduna State Governor Nasser El-Rufai has directed revenue agents of ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs in the state, to collect the old and new Naira notes. El-Rufai's directive was predicated on the existing Supreme Court order on old Naira notes. A statement by the governor's special advisor on media and communication, Muyiwa Adekeye, reads, in line with the subsisting order of the Supreme Court, the Kaduna State government has directed its ministries, departments and agencies to ensure that their collection agents continue to accept payments made in all denominations of the Naira, old and new. The governor also opposed President Muhammadu Buhari over his directive banning the use of the old 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes in spite of the Supreme Court order. The APC chieftain accused Buhari of allowing evil individuals to use him to fight and defeat the All Progressives Congress, APC. El-Rufai said those people using the president as an instrument to defeat the APC are doing so because they failed to force their own candidates on the party during the June 2022 primaries. He emphasized that the all Naira notes will be valid in Kaduna State. And finally, on elections, tension grips INEC over preparedness of security agencies. Less than a week to Saturday's presidential and National Assembly elections, signs have emerged that officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, have been gripped with tension over the readiness of various security agencies to be deployed for the election. National Commissioner, who spoke on condition of anonymity, stated his worries over the wave of violent protests following the redesign of the nation's currency recently introduced by the federal government. According to the reports, Commission has not got a commensurate response for peaceful conduct of the poll from security agencies, saying though the INEC is ready for this weekend's presidential and National Assembly election, it will, however, wait for the reaction and assurances from the security agencies. Equally, he spoke on the vows by the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, to assist the Commission with cash to offset some responsibilities, stressing that without it, the Commission will face some difficulties. However, INEC boss Mahmoud Yakubu said, speaking on both the security and the cash request from the CBN, on what is happening around the country, the protest that you mentioned, it is a security matter. This is an issue that we are going to discuss with the security agencies. Commenting on speculations that the CBN may not meet up with INEC's demand for cash to perform some of the election day logistics, he said, and I quote, "We visited the CBN last week on the issue of cash for payment of some of the services, not all, some of the services that we are going to engage on election day. The bulk of payment for goods, works and services are made by the Commission through electronic transfer." The Commission, confident that the poll will hold on Saturday, is hinged on a report that the security agencies, despite the increasing wave of protests across the country over the federal government's economic policy on Naira. Although INEC chairman revealed that the issue will be considered during an emergency meeting with the security agencies this week, the commissioner said, according to reports, that the Commission will notify Nigerians on the true situation of things on Tuesday during a World Press Conference. A recap of major stories says New Zealand extends state of emergency over Cyclone Gabrielle. China provinces top list of regions vulnerable from climate change. Taiwan's KMT hopes for polls increase after China trip. In Brazil, Sao Paulo state, floods, landslides kill dozens, and North Korea launches more missiles amidst firing range warning. Remember, it is better to fail in originality than to succeed in imitation. Thanks for watching. I remain Lois Rek.